2013 might have been an unlucky year for some, but not for me, because I got to see 26 movies, and today I'm going to be ranking a nice rounded up number of them. So 25 of them then. So if you're wondering why I don't just rank all 26, well, if you've been watching this series for a while, you'll know that I always limit the numbers in these rankings to 25 films just to keep the videos manageable. I mean, there was one year where I'd seen 39 films, but I wasn't going to rank all of those. So we've got one honourable mention today, if you like, and that film is Captain Phillips, starring Tom Hanks. It's a film where Hanks basically plays some kind of boat captain who ends up trapped on a ship full of pirates. Under siege it isn't. Let's just leave it at that. One more thing before we get into it, and that is a quick reminder that the top two films today will go through to the eventual grand final, where I will be declaring once and for all and with great authority as to what the greatest film of all time is. But for now, let's concentrate on 2013, and we'll start with the film that I have in 25th place. Apologies to Mr. Bolton or any other Star Trek fan watching this. I'm just not into these more modern iterations of Star Trek. I watched all of these films earlier this year and I had a good time up to the end of The Undiscovered Country, but from the minute that that first crew change happens, I was just on fumes for the rest of the films, really. I mean, there's one or two in there that are all right. I thought Insurrection was okay. Star Trek Beyond is all right, the last one. But this one, I got nothing out of this one at all. They bring a new version of Khan into this one, and I couldn't have been more bored watching this. I mean, my mind was into darkness watching this film, and it didn't come out again until the credits rolled, really. So I do think that Star Trek Beyond will do better than 25th when we get to 2016, but today it's pretty much a washout, I'm afraid, when it comes to Star Trek Into Darkness. If you're a fan of the film or a fan of the series in general, I guess you can at least console yourself with the fact that the film did just enough to get into the ranking to earn its own title card. Fans of Captain Phillips were not so lucky today. I don't remember much about this one other than the fact that it was sort of alright. I watched it with my dad, and it wouldn't have been long after the film came out, actually. He was visiting, and I think we had pizza and beer, and we caught up a little bit, and then we watched this film, and I sort of remember it being alright, and that's about it. I think it's about a Arizona sheriff played by Schwarzenegger, maybe. I'm sketchy on the details, and I think there's some bad guys who turn up in this town for some reason, but by Schwarzenegger standards, it's a really low-key action film. I mean, it's nothing like his older films from his classic run back in the 80s, 90s, you know. This one it's just a really kind of small-time thriller set in this small town. I wouldn't go back to it unless I was doing some kind of complete run through the Arnie films. I won't watch this one again. It's the sort of film you watch on a Tuesday night on Amazon or something. So if you don't know, this is a spin-off to the Pixar film Cars. They made 3 Cars films, 2 Planes films, and I got to see all of them at one point in time because my kids had them on constantly. I think I personally preferred the Planes films, and I don't really know why. It's weird because I'm actually afraid of planes in real life. I'm not afraid of cars, which in and of itself is weird because I've had a car accident. I've never had a plane accident, but anyway. I don't know, honestly, why I prefer planes over cars. I can't really think of a reason, although maybe it's because the Cars films spent more time on the TV in our house to the point where I personally got a little bit fed up of them. You know how kids can just watch the same thing over and over and not get bored, but with an adult, if they watch a film twice in a year, that's sometimes too much even for a good film. Well, I went through that with Cars, especially Cars 1. I mean, that film must have got like 50 plays in our house over the course of a couple of years, and I just started to know all the dialogue. I just got so fed up of it. The 2 Planes films got less TV play, definitely. So when my kids did watch those ones, maybe for me, they were a little bit more fresh. I think that's what it is. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because I'm not going to watch any of these films anymore. My kids are past the age now where they would watch these. So given that they're probably not going to make any more of these now, I think it is a dead franchise. I think we can sort of safely move on and say goodbye to it, at least until the point in time comes that I've got to rank Planes 2 Fire and Rescue. I would probably class myself as half a fan of The Fast and the Furious. I like to watch each new one as they come out just to see what craziness they've got up their sleeve, but I'm not passionate about the films, and this sixth one is one of the worst in my opinion, which is odd because it comes sandwiched between two of the very best, 5 and 7. But there are a few things I don't like about this. The Letty amnesia subplot just doesn't work for me. I don't like the finale on the never-ending runway. And there's another bit that sticks in my craw. So there's like a tank chase on a highway with cars in it as well, and Dom does this jump from one car to another, and it's just the most impossible, stupid thing you've ever seen. It's probably the series' first jump the shark moment where they just take things a little bit too far, make it too unrealistic. And this is something that would crop up even more in some of the later films like Part 9 and Hobbs and Shaw. This film is still watchable, it's still an alright time, but it's definitely one of the worst in the franchise for me. This is a hated film among die-hard fans. I've only seen it the one time. It was with my dad. It was another one of those father-son meetups, except we were at his house this time. Now, my dad isn't around anymore, but when he was, and we would occasionally meet up to watch a film, have a couple of beers, the films that we watched would always seem a little bit better than they actually were, just because it was a social occasion. I was back together with my dad again, you know how it is. So I actually thought Die Hard 5 was all right on the night that I watched it. I mean, I knew it was nothing special, nothing as good as the previous 4, but I didn't get pissed off when I was watching it. I sat through the whole thing and thought, yeah, okay, it was all right, I suppose. Since then, I've sort of been afraid to watch it a second time because I think to myself, well, if I watch it alone now, I will get the proper version of Die Hard 5, which is to say that it's going to turn out to be way worse than I recall. I did actually buy it a while back on DVD. It was going for like £1 somewhere, so I took the opportunity to pick it up just to put it on my shelf, complete my collection. But I think that was like 5 years ago now that I bought the DVD, and I've still not watched it. There's part of me that would just like to never watch this film again, just preserve it as something I watched once with my dad and I was able to enjoy it that way. But I'll probably end up having that second watch at some point, maybe when my son gets old enough to watch these films. Another one that doesn't get much love inside the franchise that it's a part of, although I've always thought that it's all right. I think because I'm British, I was always destined to like this a little bit more than most Americans, because a lot of it's set in London, and at one point Thor has to use the tube, which is just really cool. I've always liked his little band of followers in these earlier Thor films, you know, the scientist guy and the brunette, whose name I can't remember. And I've always liked Natalie Portman in any film. Okay, granted, the villain's not very good in this film. And it's annoying that Loki comes back again. I think this was like the third time already that he'd had a major role in one of these films. And this is still very early on in the Marvel cycle. But I don't think the film's bad. I might even put it better than the first Thor film. I'd certainly rather watch this than the first Avengers film, which I don't like at all. I've not done a Marvel ranking for a while, but this certainly wouldn't be bottom for me like it would for some people. I think there are about 26, 27 Marvel films now. That's a guess. I might have this like 21, 22, but without watching the films again, I can't know for sure. But I'm certainly not one of the film's big detractors, put it that way. So here we have the third in the Riddick franchise. This one is an attempt to go back to the spirit of the first film, Pitch Black, because Riddick is essentially on a weird planet with aliens, and there's a little bit of a human threat. There are some bandits or pirates down there with him. I've only watched this once since I bought the disc, and I sort of enjoyed it, but it's not as good as the first two. The budget is straining at the seams in this. I mean, straining. And there's a weird narrative tie-in to the first movie, which I don't think needed to be there. But the film's all right. And if they made another one, I would certainly check it out. This disc, by the way, I don't know why, but it came with an advert for Scott's menswear, and I've always kept it inside my Riddick box just in case I ever want to order anything from Scott's menswear. And you know what, I'm going to put it back in the box now just in case that situation ever arises in the future. This is the sixth Child's Play film and something of a return to form. I mean, I enjoyed Seed of Chucky. I thought it was good for a laugh. But this is probably the first proper horror film in this series since Child's Play 3. It's very much a case of back to basics. Chucky being scary again. He's in this large house with a family and he's picking them off one by one. There's a really amusing lesbian subplot in this film, which in my opinion doesn't quite go to its full potential, but overall the film's really good. I would probably put it halfway up my Child's Play ranking if I was to do one today, maybe just slightly higher than halfway. The film leaves quite a few dangling threads at the end of it, from what I can recall, to tease you with the idea that there might be more movies, and there was at least one more in this cycle. On the subject of Child's Play, actually, I've still not checked out the TV show, and it's into its second season now, but it's not on any of the subscription services that I've got. I've got Disney, Netflix and Amazon, and I don't remember seeing it on any of those, but I'm sure at some point the series will drop in my lap somehow, because I would like to check it out. It is the traditional Brad Dourif Chucky, isn't it? But this film is one of the good ones, I would say. Certainly one of the good ones from the later Child's Play era. This is a bit of an underrated gem of a thriller. It's about three women who decide to go camping together on this island. It's not a faraway island. It's maybe off the coast of New Jersey or somewhere. It's the sort of island where if you stand on the beach and look really carefully, you can probably still make out the mainland. It's only a short little boat ride away. But once these women get there, they realise that there are also two men on the island. These guys are ex-soldiers who have just come back from Afghanistan, and they're a little bit screwed up because of the experiences that they had over there. Now, the two groups do get along with each other at first. They share a campfire and have a good time, but then things come to a head, I think because one of the women doesn't want to get with one of the guys, possibly. The women end up having to scamper off into the woods, and then we've got a survival thriller, basically, where the women have got to try and survive against these two guys who both have rifles with them. Now, this film doesn't sound much, but it plays out really nicely. There's nothing contrived in it. There's no situation in this film where I'm thinking to myself, oh yeah, the film's just written that so that the women can conveniently survive for the next scene. It plays out in a really realistic way, and the finale, when it comes, is very well staged and choreographed. I was very satisfied at the end of this. And the three women who play the three female characters, they're not just newcomers on the scene, new actresses, that they're really accomplished actresses who are in their late 20s, early 30s. One of them is Kate Bosworth, who at one point played Lois in one of the big Superman films, and the other two actresses have got really good filmographies as well, from memory. So this is absolutely a film worth checking out, even though probably nobody else in the world apart from me has ever seen it before. I watched this just last week, actually, with my son. It was his first time. It was probably my third. But my biggest complaint with this, actually, is probably the same one that I had with the first Hobbit film, which is just that the action feels too video gamey. It's a little bit silly at times. None of the dwarves die again. I mean, we start with 13 and we still have 13 at the end for the second film running, despite the fact that they've gone through all these dangerous situations with giant spiders and dragons, and at one point they have like a barrel ride down this river and orcs are firing arrows at them left, right and centre, and yet none of them die. If you can get your head around that and just enjoy this for what it is, then you can still have a good time, and I do generally, you know. It's just a shame that with this Hobbit trilogy they sort of lowered the tone a little bit and just made it lighter, because I don't remember having a problem with the realism and the action in the Lord of the Rings films. Speaking of which, Legolas is in this. He was one of the mainstays from Lord of the Rings, and we get a very cute Evangeline Lilly in this, playing an elf. On the whole, though, I don't know. It's not quite right for me. the way that this film is made. I think the third film is actually the worst of the bunch as well. I think these first two are the good ones, if you like, and then the third one, all I remember about that is just this really big, boring battle. But me and my son are due to watch that in the next few days. So hopefully, by the time my 2014 rankings roll around, the third Hobbit film will be fresh in my mind so I can slag it off. This is my favourite of the X-Men films, and it's still only come at this point of the rankings today. That tells you all you need to know about where I stand when it comes to the X-Men franchise, really. But this one's a good one. It's very much its own thing. It's completely disentangled from the main mythology, from the other films. It takes place almost entirely in Japan. There's this really good action sequence on a train. So basically Wolverine's on one of those Japanese bullet trains and there are villains trying to get him in it. It reminds me a lot of the end to Mission Impossible 1 when Tom Cruise is on the top of that train and his hair's blowing all over the place. I think effects had come on a little bit between Mission Impossible 1 and the Wolverine from 2013. But this film is just enjoyable all the way through. It's got a good finale that takes place in some kind of cave or scientific chamber or something. I can't remember what Wolverine has to take on at the end of this. It escapes me, but I like the film, and it is officially my favourite X-Men film, although I've not seen all of them, and I've not seen the third solo Wolverine film, Logan, which a lot of people say is one of the best in the entire franchise. A much maligned film in the Texas Chainsaw franchise, but I've always kind of liked it. In fact, I ranked it second, I think, the last time that I did a Texas Chainsaw franchise ranking. I had it just behind the original. I saw this one at the cinema, actually. I didn't catch a 3D showing. It was only a 2D showing. There were only about 10 people in the cinema when I saw it. It was a Saturday night, although I can't remember if it was opening weekend or not, so I won't pass judgment on those numbers. But I had a good time, and if anything, years later, when I rewatched the film at home, I liked it even more. This film has got one of the best chase sequences in the franchise. It starts out at this house and ends up at a fairground. It's brilliant. I like the lead actress, Alexandra Daddario. She's good. The film does have its flaws, sadly. There's this one line of dialogue which is surely one of the worst in cinema history. It's when the main girl near the end says, "Do your thing, cuz." Oh, it's cringeworthy, and I'm not a big fan of the finale as well. They sort of leave it open for a possible sequel, but I think that was a mistake. Well, firstly, the film didn't do well enough to get a straight sequel. They ended up rebooting it or doing something different. But secondly, the story just demanded a completely different finish to this than what we actually got. So that's a shame, because I think if they'd have finished this film off properly and just made it a one and done, I think it would have been a really great little horror film, actually, instead of just a reasonable one. This is a film about some kind of up-and-coming banker played by Leonardo DiCaprio. We watch him as he rises through the ranks at like Goldman Sachs or somewhere and eventually becomes one of the richest stockbrokers in the country. He's got like yachts and he's a millionaire, but the trouble is how he's gone about achieving this very much straddles the line between what's legal and what's not, and his life ends up kind of falling apart in the second half of the film. His character's married to a woman played by Margot Robbie, and the marriage ends up going to pot as well. So this is very much a kind of rise and fall type movie, but the film keeps you watching because Leonardo DiCaprio is so intense as an actor that I couldn't take my eyes off this, even though I've no particular interest in the banking world or this particular industry. It's nothing that I would normally think about on a day-to-day basis, but the film definitely gets my seal of approval. It's funny in several places. It's a very long film, but I was certainly never bored. Probably I'll never go back to it. The one scene that I can remember more than any other is this one where DiCaprio's having brunch with this guy, and he's explaining how he gets himself going in the morning, and he says he basically takes a bit of cocaine and then starts singing this weird song where he's like, "Boom," and I can't remember the song or whatever it is that he sings, but I was just sat there thinking, what the frig? It's a bizarre film, but it's very watchable. This is the second Hunger Games film out of 4, and I'm not actually sure I went on after this and watched 3 and 4. I read all of the books back in the day. I'm just not sure that I watched all of the movies for whatever reason. I just don't think I got onto them. I think I might have seen a little bit of the 4th movie when my wife just happened to be watching it on TV this one time, but in terms of watching the films properly all the way through from first minute to last, I think the second Hunger Games film was it for me. But the weird thing is, when I saw it at the cinema, this was the only one of these I saw at the cinema, I came out thinking I'd had a really good time and I was absolutely up for watching more. I don't know what happened looking back, but this one's pretty cool. I don't remember all that much about the plot, just my main memory of it is the Battle Royale game at the end. They've jazzed it up a little bit this time. There's like a massive water machine or something. It's pretty cool. I'd say that this is marginally better than the first film, although my experience could have been heightened because I was watching the second one in the cinema. I'm not sure. Just talking about these films has really made me want to go back to them now and do a fresh run through. The Iron Man films have performed roughly the same as each other in this ranking series. They usually come around about 10th, and this one has more or less done the same thing. It's a fine Iron Man film. I still think the original one is the best, but this one's good. It's written by Shane Black, I think, and it's got lots of great humour in it. I love the fact that the Mandarin turns out to be not the villain we think, but actually just this random womanizing scouser. Really, really funny. I know some fans didn't like that plot twist, but for someone like me who didn't grow up watching the animated series or reading the comics, I just think it's a really funny little turn of events halfway through the story. And there's other good stuff in this as well. The finale at the dockyards where all the Iron Man suits converge and help take down the villains, I think that's a great way to end the film. And earlier than that, there's a really good assault on Tony's mansion. So this film works for me. Not one of my favourite Marvel films, but definitely not one that I would put all the way down near the bottom. This is a found footage film about a young couple who go camping somewhere in California, and they're following some kind of Bigfoot trail. So the place where they're going camping, it's right next to this town which is kind of famous for Bigfoot sightings. So this couple, they spend a bit of time going around asking people about Bigfoot, and they piss off a few locals in the process because people in this town are a little bit sick of people turning up and asking about Bigfoot. But this couple end up in the woods, and I won't give away the horror that befalls them, but it's a fascinating little film. I've actually watched this one twice. That just shows you how good I think that it is. I watched it this one time, and then a few years later I couldn't resist going back to it for another watch. There's an interesting scene about halfway through it where the guy actually proposes to his girlfriend in a tent, and I can't remember if she says yes or whether she turns him down. If she does say yes, it's in the most awkward way possible that makes you think that something's not quite all right with this couple. I wish I could remember the specifics of that scene, but take it from me, it's not the most straightforward proposal you've ever seen in a tent. But there's some good horror in this. The main stuff that the film sets out to achieve, it mostly gets right. I've seen way better found footage films, but this one's definitely worth adding to your bucket list if you like this type of horror. This is a franchise I've become more and more of a fan of over the years, and this culminated in me going to watch the 5th one at the cinema last year. The first time that I've watched one of these at the cinema, and I've also started buying up the Blu-rays for the older films. So I've got this first Purge film on Blu-ray. I've probably watched the movie in total 3 or 4 times. It is one that I keep going back to. The entire concept of the Purge is a really cool one. It totally wouldn't work in real life, but if you don't know what it is, basically, in this series, for one day a year, people are allowed to kill each other or commit any crimes that they want, and they won't be prosecuted. It's kind of so that people can get the violence out of their system for 24 hours. So theoretically, for the rest of the year, they should then behave. I mean, it's stupid. It totally wouldn't work if it was tried for real. But in the movie world, it's a brilliant idea, and I absolutely think it's cool as hell. So in this first film, we've got this one family who want nothing to do with the Purge. They just put their shutters down at the start of the night, and the idea is they're just going to ride it out and not get involved. But they end up drawing the attention of this weird gang of posh kids who have got violence on their mind. They do want to take part in the Purge. They do want to kill people. So most of the movie is this assault from outside the house of these kids trying to get into the house, and it's just really cool. I can feel the tension in this film long before these posh kids have turned up. It's just something that really works for me, and it ended up leading to this whole raft of sequels as well. I wouldn't mind doing a review series for this franchise at some point. So if you followed the channel for a while, you'll know that I've already done a full review series for VHS, and here is my copy of the second movie. So we get 4 brand new stories in this one, plus a wraparound segment that links the main stories together, although probably the wraparound is the weakest part of this movie, but the 4 main stories are really enjoyable. So in the first one, there's this guy who, because of some road traffic accident, he needs a bionic eye. But when he goes back home, he realises that he can suddenly see ghosts and spirits and things. The second story is set in the woods. It's about this zombie outbreak, and we follow the action from the point of view of the zombies, which makes it different from what you normally get with these sort of tales. The third story is set in Jakarta or somewhere like that, and it involves this place that's like a compound run by this absolute madman, and this documentary crew go inside there, and all hell breaks loose, and there's some kind of demonic entity running around or something with like a goat's head. It's really weird. And the fourth story is about this UFO that comes down and tries to swipe these kids when they're on a sleepover. So VHS 2, whilst not being one of my favourite ones in the franchise, it's still an absolute riot and thoroughly recommended. I do like my horror anthologies even outside of VHS. So here we have the first of the long-running Conjuring franchise. I'm a massive fan of this series now, albeit it wasn't always the case. I think it was The Conjuring 2. When that was in cinemas, that's when I started to take note of this and its success, and it made me want to try it out. The Conjuring 2 was the third film by that point, because there'd been an Annabelle spin-off just before it. So it took me a little bit of time to get to this, but I made it there eventually. But I certainly can't tell you what it would have been like to discover this first film back in 2013 when it was an unknown entity. But this series got me into this type of horror, and I hadn't been previously. You know, stuff to do with exorcisms and the supernatural and possessions. I didn't used to watch horror films to do with that stuff, but the Conjuring universe opened my mind a little bit. This and another big franchise that we're going to come to in just a few moments, but I've seen all of these movies now. I really enjoy them. This first film is a little bit awkwardly structured. I think in the hands of a poorer director than James Wan, it could have gone horribly wrong, because it's a little bit odd. The viewpoints that we focus, we sort of spend time with Ed and Lorraine Warren, the paranormal investigators, and then we spend quite a bit of time with the residents of the house, which is the main focus of the story. And you get this awkward little 10-minute spell near the beginning where we're sort of focused on Annabelle. So it could have gone wrong, this film, because it's a little bit of a weirdly structured narrative, but it's the majesty of what you'd call the scare scenes that really makes it tick, because Wan just directs the hell out of it. I've heard a lot of people on YouTube and through other forms of media just say how much that this film scared the shit out of them with how the jump scares are done and how the darker sequences are handled. It's a top-notch film from that point of view. I wouldn't say that it's my favourite of the series. I think there would go on to be better films than this, but for some people this is still the best film in this franchise. But I always really look forward to each new one as they come out. I think the next one is The Nun 2 next year, but yeah, it's going on almost 10 years now, this series, and still going great guns. So this is that other franchise I was just hinting at that had a big impact on me 10 or so years ago. Insidious has a different set of basic genetics to The Conjuring, but it goes for a similar sort of atmosphere, similar scares. When I think of the Conjuring franchise, it doesn't take a lot for me to then also think of the Insidious films. And this second one did a good job of just reining back on some of the excesses of the first film, because given everything that you see at the end of Insidious 1 with the demon world and the demon itself and all that crazy stuff, this second film could have gone a little bit haywire, and maybe the longevity of this franchise wouldn't have been all that great, but I think they reined things back a little bit with this chapter 2. They tell a very subtle story here. They keep things very mysterious, and I like it a lot, this second one, although probably not a lot of people would put this ahead of The Conjuring 1, maybe. This is going to be a film that a lot of people are going to have to rewatch ahead of next year's Part 5, because in this franchise, 3 and 4 are prequels, whereas 1 and 2 are set in the present, and then Part 5 is going to follow on from number 2, albeit with a gap between 2 and 5. So yeah, definitely one to revisit before next October, though I'll probably do a full run because I've not seen any of these for a little while. A sci-fi film with Tom Cruise, you say? Well, yes. I mean, he did War of the Worlds at some point, and he also did this. This is a really good film, albeit I can't remember the plot that well. So Tom Cruise plays some kind of space pilot, and he's working on Earth, but Earth is now a wasteland, seemingly, but a wasteland with like these really tall towers spaced out. I don't know what they do now that I think back on it. Cruise has a wife somewhere in one of these towers, and she maybe dies or is a clone or is maybe against him or maybe with him. I can't actually remember. And there are space robots here and there who attack him at one point in a cave. You know what? The plot has completely gone out of my head, but it was a damn good sci-fi film, and if you're into this sort of thing, then check this out. It's not to be missed, and you might even remember the plot better than I do. I'm tempted to say that Zack Snyder is sort of like the Rob Zombie of superhero films, in that you've got this camp of people who love him and the camp of people who hate him, but I think that might be a bit harsh these days, because I think Snyder is getting a lot more love as the years progress. I think it might be the 4-hour cut of Justice League that's done it. I think that might have finally converted people into seeing his particular brand of brilliance, whereas maybe before they weren't so sure. And of course now he's done Army of the Dead, which is another big feather in his cap. I think a lot of people would love it if Schneider came back to the DC extended universe, but I don't think it's going to happen. Studio just do not like him for whatever reason. But this first Superman film is absolutely brilliant. It just blew me away when I first saw it. I just couldn't believe that the quality of the aerial action fights between Superman and Zod's chums. There's some great stuff in this. If they ever re-release all of the DC extended universe films in cinemas like what they did with James Bond this year, I would love to go into a cinema and see this on the big screen. That would be really, really cool. So today's unlucky film, which only just misses out on the grand final, is the Evil Dead remake, or is it a remake? Some people think it's just a sequel that takes place at a different cabin in a different woods. It's a bit like the whole debate about whether Evil Dead 2 is a remake of the first Evil Dead, or is that actually a sequel? I personally take the line that they're all sequels rather than remakes, but I don't think you're wrong if you swing the other way. I'm not even sure the people who made these films could tell you definitively one way or the other, but whichever line you take on that, this is a fantastic modern reimagining of the whole Evil Dead concept. It's gloriously violent. The CGI goes a little bit far at times. It almost strays too far, but not quite. And the finale you get with this, with the final girl and the demon thing in the front garden, front porch, wherever it takes place, it's phenomenal. Really good stuff. Fede Alvarez, I think it was, who did this. Did a terrific job, I've got to say, and I'm really looking forward to the next Evil Dead film, which I think is coming out next year, which would mean we would have waited 10 years since this one. But if it's as good as this film, then the wait would have absolutely been worth it. Right, so we're now up to the top two films, the two films that will be going through to the grand final. So let's see what we've got at number 2. This is probably a controversial film to have at number 2, especially if you're an Evil Dead fan, but I absolutely love this. Here is my Blu-ray of it. You'll notice straight away that the title on here is different to what I just had on my little picture clip. So here we've got the Dyatlov Pass incident, and I believe on the picture I labelled it as Devil's Pass, but neither one is wrong. This film does have different titles depending on which region you're in, although I have personally thought of it as Devil's Pass for quite some time actually. I was quite surprised today when I took this off the shelf and saw that it had the different title. One of the reasons why I love this film, aside from the fact that it's just a bloody good horror film anyway, is the fact that it is based upon a real life incident that happened in Russia in the snowy mountains, somewhere near Siberia possibly. Now, I'm not going to explain to you what that's all about because it's too large in scope for me to just properly explain in like a minute or 2 minutes. I'd need to talk at length for quite some time to properly explain what the Dyatlov Pass incident was. So just look it up on Google if you're interested, but or you could just check out this movie because this movie it's a humdinger. I really like it. So I've got this film at number 2 for sort of similar reasons, I guess, for why I put Chernobyl Diaries at number 2 when I did my 2012 rankings. That was a horror film that was also based on a real life incident. In that case, Chernobyl, which is a little bit more famous than the incident that this film is based upon, but yeah, this is a cracking film. Watching these backpackers go to Russia and they're chasing after the legend of this thing that happened for real back, God knows when. I'm not sure what decade the actual incident behind this film happened in, but it's a corker, although probably for most people it wouldn't be good enough to get into the top 2 against all of the other films that we've been talking about today. But this is a personal list, and for me this is just how the films came out. This has come out in second place and I'm content with my decision. But there is one more film that has beaten this. Let's now find out what that is. This is a film I only saw for the first time about a year ago, although a friend tried to get me to watch it like 4 or 5 years back, but I was just completely unwilling to listen. I think I was sort of like, come on, Sandra Bullock in a spacesuit doing sci-fi, piss off. But it turns out I was completely wrong about this film because it's amazing. I absolutely loved it, and I've seen it twice now. I couldn't resist going back for a second go not long after my first. So if you don't know what this film is about, Sandra Bullock and George Clooney play 2 astronauts. They're in space working on a satellite or something, and some debris flies towards them, completely ruins the spaceship that they went up there on. So they're just floating around in space. They've got these little booster propeller things that mean they can shoot forwards, but the batteries are sort of running out on those, or whatever constitutes batteries in space. It sounds like the sort of premise where you might think, well, how do they make a whole movie out of this? But the film manages it. You know, they're not just stuck there kind of floating around talking. A lot happens in this. At one point, Bullock ends up on the International Space Station. There's tons of things that happen. And it's really exciting, wondering whether or not anybody is going to survive this. It's not the longest film of this ilk. I think pretty sure that it comes in at less than 2 hours, though I can't be certain about that. But I didn't want this film to end. I just found it absolutely enthralling. It genuinely looks like they're in space in this film. It's absolutely phenomenal. If I was reviewing this film, I definitely would have given it 5 out of 5. It's one of my favourite sci-fi movies now, and I'm definitely going to add this to my collection at some point. The only reason why I haven't so far is because it was available for free for a while on one of my subscription services, so I haven't needed to buy it, but going forwards, I'm definitely going to purchase it. Right, so that's it for today. We have Gravity and Devil's Pass, or the Dyatlov Pass incident if you prefer, going through to the grand final. I'll quickly let you know the names of some of the films from 2013 that I've not seen but I wouldn't mind seeing. I've got 3 of them written down today: Olympus Has Fallen, World War Z, and Escape Plan. Right, that's it for today. I'll catch you all again next time for my 2014 movie rankings. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.